big news of this week, and it's been quite moving. It's about President Bush, 41, and his funeral. Before we begin, let us show you this video that we're getting ready to show you.
America is never wholly herself unless she is engaged in high moral principle. We as a people have such a purpose today. It is to make kinder the face of the nation and gentler the face of the world.
It's part of what we were talking about. President George H.W. Bush at his own inauguration in '89. This week, Bush is being remembered as the last of his kind, and a stark difference to the leadership style of our current president. While Bush 41 encouraged that kinder, gentler nation, President Trump came into office with his talk of American carnage at his inauguration, having already declared the American dream, in his words, is dead. And as the Washington Post headline points out, quote, honorable, gracious, and decent, in death, Bush becomes a yardstick for President Trump.
Well, as you can see, it's been quite a week. President Bush, number 41, in his passing, has really brought the entire country to a stop. It's been a relatively slow news week because of it, and he was laid to rest today. You had a very big moment at the funeral at the National Cathedral yesterday when you saw all of the presidents, all the living presidents and the first ladies, all lined up in the single row. A lot of controversy about it. But what we wanted to talk about for a couple of minutes related to President Bush, 41. With his passing, he is the last president that is a World War II president, the last of what is called the Great Generation. We wanted to take a moment to discuss his relationship to his legacy and what it means to the gay community. What do y'all think?
Well, my first comment is not necessarily about the gay community, because we lost President Bush, but I was in the midst when he passed away of burying my aunt of 90 years. And so it was kind of a double whammy. But in the midst of burying her and walking through family, and the comments of family, it was also because they're of the same generation, okay, working through comments of legacy. And a song came to mind, and I will apologize, but it's a song that talks about legacy, and it very much relates to President Bush. And it was originally sung by Keith Green. It's called Find Us Faithful. And I think that's been the theme of President Bush and his legacy. It talks about, it says, the words are, surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us run the race not only for the prize, but as those who've gone before us, let us leave to those behind us the heritage of faithfulness passed on through godly lives. Oh, may all who come behind us find us faithful. May the fire of our devotion light their way. May the footprints that we leave lead them to believe, and the lives we live inspire them to obey. And I think that's what his life was. And that's because he's left those footprints. He's left that legacy to inspire people. And I think this week was a lot of inspiration from many of the things that were said.
And enough to compare him to family that passed. That's how much you feel strongly about it.
Yes. And in fact, that song I sang 25 years ago at my mother's funeral. Because when she passed away, there were close to 700 people that filed through. She was a teacher for 30 years in a small town of only 2,000, okay? We had 700 people come through.
I read this morning that in the Capitol, the night before the National Cathedral, from midnight to 5 a.m. alone, more than 12,000 people paid their respects in the Capitol to him. That's amazing in terms of at that time, so many people would wait in the cold to be able to pass.
Yeah. I heard it was the most
12,000
ever.
Well, that's all.
Visual proof.
That's all very sweet. 100,000 people died while George W. Bush
Look how she started.
did nothing and said nothing about the AIDS crisis. Just saying. I find it kind of ironic that he died a day before World AIDS Day. I'm sorry, I'm not one of these people who thinks that we should speak so kindly and lovely just because somebody died.
No.
And, you know, granted, he wasn't as bad as Reagan. Once he took office, he claimed to be kinder and gentler, but it was more of a kinder and gentler indifference. He largely did almost nothing to address the AIDS crisis, to address the gay community. He had one nice speech, like, okay. But other than that, and he did sign in the Americans with Disabilities Act. He did sign in the Ryan White Care Act. However, I will say, and I would love to say, thank you to ACT UP and all of the activists of that time who fought to make sure that happened.
So just to follow up for that, because I think Bush 43 followed up from where his father left off, and errantly so. He invested the largest amount of federal dollars in fighting the AIDS crisis in the U.S. and abroad of any president in history.
Yeah, and
You're talking about Junior?
while I think that
43,
is true,
yes.
and I'm glad
Yes.
of that.
Yes.
Aaron's specific point was the Reagan years and
I-
moving into Bush.
and
41.
I understand that, but I mean, yes, it should have been done earlier, but there's a lot about familiarity and understanding that was lacking at the time. It really was.
I mean, he
Is it an
understood enough
excuse? No.
to give a speech about it, but he didn't understand it enough to actually put forth any action to it. You know, I don't remember who it was that said it, but basically the quote that I read was, "Talk is cheap, AIDS funding is not."
Yeah.
And so the lip service was all great, but it did nothing to. 100,000 people died. 150,000 more people were infected over the course of 10 years, and they
Not to mention
largely
the
said
stigma
nothing.
that caused for
Right,
decades.
that
to
ripple
come.
effect is still occurring today.
Other-
Well,
thoughts?
I would. Okay. Well, I would like to look at it from his funeral and his passing from another angle. First of all, child, have they finally put this man in the ground yet? Because, girl, this funeral started in 1972. I'm telling you, this is the longest funeral I have ever seen. And every time, and I will say this, to Aaron's point and to Joe's point, I actually did my research and looked up, and I was going to come and list some of the things he did and some of the things he didn't do for the gay community. But after looking at his funeral, let me just speak off the cuff without my comment card and just say that the man, there's a lot of things that he failed on, without a doubt. And one thing I didn't know, and I found out this week in actually researching him, was all this time you've been sitting here, log cabin Republican, I really didn't know what a log cabin Republican was, other than that you are a Republican. I didn't really realize that they were
Abraham
like,
Lincoln. The reference to Abraham Lincoln.
well, they are the gay, specifically gay
Yeah.
Republicans.
Yes.
Okay, and it's interesting that the log cabin Republicans actually didn't did not endorse him for his, I believe it was his second run. They didn't endorse him.
And he was one of the first that they didn't endorse, I believe.
That was very interesting.
Because of his position on marriage.
Okay,
Yeah. Makes sense.
but I will say this: there are certain people that you can say you disagree with on policy, but when you look at the sum of their life, personally, you can still have respect for them. And I didn't really know where to fall when it came to President Bush, and I had even told a friend of mine, Catherine Nevitz, that I'm not going to post anything on my page, period, because I don't know which way to feel about, and if I don't really have something glowing to say about somebody that's passed, I'm not going to be disrespectful. Save one president if he dies. Oh yeah, I have a lot to say. But
People die.
but I think that I certainly respect him because he lived a life of service, and the fact that he didn't he was against gay marriage and the mistakes that he made, I have to say, and when people always say, oh, Obama was against gay marriage and Hillary was against gay marriage, oh, so what? And he was against gay marriage too. But you know what? People evolve. And I was against gay marriage too, and I'm the gayest bitch up in here. You know? So people evolve, and back then it was a different time. Now, I'm not talking about what he should have done, what he should have known as regards to the AIDS crisis, the AIDS battle, all that stuff. I will never agree with his positions when it comes to that and never respect his decisions. But I can come to a point where somebody, just like John McCain, that I don't agree with their policies and we will always differ, but the man in totality was a good man, I have to respect
say
that.
to you that, and one of our followers on Facebook made the note just a couple of moments ago that he was from a kinder time, and I think that that's a beautiful phrase. I agree with you, because one of the things that I've thought about this week is, first off, on gay marriage. Many people do not know that in his time in Kennebunkport, he met the two lesbian couples that ran the country store in Kennebunkport, and he became friends with them. And when he found out that they were actually going to get married after the Supreme Court had the ruling, he joked with them repeatedly about whether he was going to get an invitation to the wedding. And they gave him an invitation, and he ultimately signed the documentation paper and ultimately said, he reversed himself on gay marriage and said it's a happiness issue, and therefore that justified being married. The one thing that I come away from this week over everything, I completely agree with your observation. Agree or disagree, we should have respect for the presidency of the office of president. And I think what we're going through, it has made it extremely difficult to do that. I have really honestly welcomed the week because it gave me a fresh perspective of saying we should respect the office. And we have a little.
Consider me disrespectful then. 'Cause...
Okay, and I understand. We have a bump in the road going on right now. I know Joe respectfully disagrees with me, but we will return to respect for the president, and perhaps this president even will make some changes that will bring respect. Regardless, I'm going to move on here. But regardless of that, the week is marked by the respect of George Bush's longevity of service, and I think we can all agree.